Last week, FIFA officially awarded Saudi Arabia the 2034 Men's World Cup.
It is a great pleasure that I can confirm that the host of the FIFA World Cup 2034 will be Saudi Arabia. Mabruk. Mabruk to our friends in Riyadh. Mabruk to everyone.
Saudi Arabia's 2034 World Cup will follow the 2026 World Cup in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and a joint bid between Spain, Portugal, Morocco, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay for the 2030 edition. Saudi Arabia will also be the second ever Middle Eastern country to host a World Cup alongside Qatar in 2022. Now, the kingdom's bid was only one vote away from unanimous approval, with Norway being the only country of FIFA's 211 member federations to vote against the hosting agreement. But in reality, the 2034 decision was never up for debate. FIFA President Gianni Infantino has spent the last several years systematically constructing a process to award the 2034 World Cup to Saudi Arabia. Infantino showed his cards when FIFA unexpectedly announced its plans for the 2030 World Cup, adding Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay to the initial bid from Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. Upon the announcement, Infantino made the typical FIFA talking points about how the 2030 World Cup would help unite football in a divided world, describing it as a historic event to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the World Cup.
In a divided world, FIFA and football are uniting. The FIFA Council, representing the entire world of football, unanimously agreed to celebrate the centenary of the FIFA World Cup, whose first edition was played in Uruguay in 1930, in the most appropriate way. As a result, a celebration will take place in South America, and 3 South American countries, Uruguay, Argentina, and Paraguay, will organize one match each of the FIFA World Cup 2030.
But with FIFA, there is always more to the story, and the implications were clear. Each South American country was only awarded one match throughout the entire month-long tournament, but by dividing the 2030 World Cup among 3 continents, South America, Europe, and Africa, that left just Asia and Oceania as the only FIFA federations eligible to host the tournament 4 years later. Why is this the case? Well, because FIFA rules state that confederation members must wait at least 2 World Cup cycles before hosting again. Then, like clockwork, Saudi Arabia announced its intention to bid on the 2034 World Cup within just 1 hour of FIFA's 2030 announcement. The Asian Football Confederation also backed Saudi Arabia's hosting bid on the same day that they made it, and FIFA shortened its typical multi-year bidding process to just 4 weeks. Right away, everyone in the soccer world knew something was amiss. Australia was also interested in hosting the 2034 World Cup, but withdrew from consideration when it became apparent that they had virtually zero chance to put in a competitive bid against Saudi Arabia. This left Saudi Arabia as the only bidder for the tournament, allowing them to secure the event completely unopposed. Game, set, match. Now, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS for short, has been strategically aiming to host the World Cup since 2017. As you may have heard, the Saudis have been working on this not-so-small project called Vision 2030. The main goal behind this initiative is to diversify Saudi Arabia's economy away from oil by spending billions on sports to 1. Clean its global image, and 2. Eventually increase tourism. This is why the country's $900 billion sovereign wealth fund has spent over $10 billion on sports investments over the last 5 years, including hosting agreements with Formula One and WWE, and ownership stakes in Newcastle United and Live Golf. But these investments are just an appetizer. The World Cup is the main course. Crown Prince MBS has spent several years courting FIFA President Gianni Infantino. The two sat with Russia President Vladimir Putin during the opening match of the 2018 World Cup in Russia, and did the same thing at Qatar in 2022. MBS and Infantino were also together during the Alexander Usyk and Anthony Joshua heavyweight title fight in 2022, and Infantino also attended the Esports World Cup in Riyadh earlier this year. This wasn't just some friendly banter and the boys catching up to reminisce about the old days. Real money has been exchanged, and MBS spent big to make his case for a Saudi World Cup. How so? Well, FIFA made an entirely new World Cup sponsor category so that Saudi-owned oil company Aramco could give them money. Saudi Arabia is also financially backing the 2025 Club World Cup in the United States, one of Infantino's biggest projects as FIFA president, and more than 50 FIFA entities now have relationships with Saudi Arabia. Ultimately, this is why FIFA turned a blind eye to potential issues in awarding Saudi Arabia its first World Cup. Despite adding human rights to its hosting criteria a few years ago, FIFA gave Saudi Arabia an average score of 4.2 out of 5. That's the highest score ever for a World Cup bid, and higher than the 4.0 score received by the US, Canada, and Mexico for the 2026 World Cup. The primary concern here is that Saudi Arabia's hosting agreement requires significant construction. For example, Saudi Arabia plans to build 11 new stadiums from scratch and renovate 4 existing ones too. They must also build over 185,000 new hotel rooms and expand the country's airport, rail, and transportation systems. Just some light updates to the house, no big deal. The size of the project also makes this an extremely ambitious task, but it gets even more complicated when you consider the scope. Some stadiums, like King Salman Stadium in Riyadh, will seat over 90,000 people. Others, such as Prince Mohammed bin Salman Stadium, will be built 650 feet off the ground and perched over a cliff with a massive LED wall taking up an entire side of the stadium. The renderings look like something out of a Star Wars movie. This has caused many people to doubt whether Saudi Arabia can even pull this off over the next decade, as the country has already scaled back and yet to finish its new $1.5 trillion megacity, Neom. Like its neighbor Qatar, Saudi Arabia employs many migrant workers. In fact, Human Rights Watch says Saudi Arabia is using 13.4 million migrant workers as the engine for its massive construction boom, representing 43% of the country's entire population. Now, offering temporary or seasonal jobs to people from other countries isn't necessarily a problem. The problem is that there's an undeniable amount of evidence that these people are being mistreated, including a worker from Nepal who told Human Rights Watch that he paid a $1,115 recruitment fee at a massive 42% interest rate for a job that required 13-hour days and paid just $346 monthly. That's if he was even paid on time. The truth is that even if we wanted to look past the bidding process and the potential human rights concerns, the 2034 World Cup still has many unknowns. Take timing, for instance. The FIFA Men's World Cup is usually played in June or July, but Riyadh and Jeddah can reach scorching temperatures of 100 degrees Fahrenheit during those months. So there is already some speculation that Saudi Arabia will have to move the tournament to November, December, or January, just as Qatar did in 2022. Saudi Arabia's new stadiums may also become white elephants that are rarely used after the World Cup, if at all. Depending on the country, this happens sometimes with large international events like the Olympics and World Cup. But Saudi Arabia is in a unique position, as they will spend billions upon billions to construct 11 brand new stadiums, despite the Saudi Pro League averaging fewer than 8,000 fans per game this past season. Because even if your league pays billions to Ronaldo, Karim Benzema, and Neymar to come play, there still aren't enough people in Saudi Arabia to fill these stadiums on a nightly basis. Another question mark on the minds of soccer fans for 2034 is the consumption of alcohol, which is currently prohibited throughout Saudi Arabia. Will Saudi Arabia follow the lead of its neighbor Qatar and ban the sale of alcoholic beverages just 2 days before the World Cup, like Qatar did in 2022? Some of these questions will be answered over the next few years. Saudi Arabia really has until 2027 to get its plan in order. But regardless of what the actual tournament looks like, it's clear that Saudi Arabia wouldn't be hosting this event without FIFA's help. Crown Prince MBS has shamelessly used Saudi Arabia's balance sheet to curry favor with FIFA's top executives, and the World Cup represents a massive step in his larger Vision 2030 plan. Now, FIFA is just hoping that Saudi Arabia can follow through, finishing venues on time and host the tournament without any major problems. But this process definitely has proved one thing: if money can't buy you happiness, it sure as hell can buy you a World Cup.